Alright, so let's discuss chapter 11, developing your speech. I just wanted to go ahead and discuss this through video because we start talking about topic, central ideas, general purpose, things like that when we start to develop our formal speeches. So I want to make sure that we're clear between the differences in those. But first, let's give a little bit of background on the process that public speaking involves. So we define public speaking as a teachable, learnable process of developing, supporting, organizing, and orally presenting ideas. So it's a very specific form of communication. You know, we've talked about group communication in here. We've talked about interpersonal, intrapersonal, that communication within ourselves, intercultural, and now we're on our last unit, public speaking, which is a form of communication that's very organized. It involves 8 stages, as you can tell from this graphic here, and we will talk about those 8 stages. And the other thing that sets public speaking apart is that it's very audience-centered. So when you're giving a public speech, you need to consider and adapt to the audience at every stage of this process, because your audience is who is going to determine if you're an effective public speaker or not, or what your purpose is. Hopefully they'll be able to do something by the time that you're done with your speech, or that they'll be informed about something, or that they'll be persuaded about something. So when you're communicating in a public speaking setting, you need to pay attention to the audience. A lot more so than if you're just having a conversation with a friend, that interpersonal communication. So that is one element that sets it apart from other forms of communication. And a lot of times with public speaking, there comes a fear. Maybe you guys are familiar with this. Maybe you've heard these statistics. Maybe you haven't. But public speaking anxiety is actually pretty common. It's experienced by more than 80% of people, and some people rank public anxiety, their fear of public anxiety, as more common than the fear of death even. Now, I promise you guys, it is not scarier than death. We will all get through this, but there is a reason why there is this anxiety surrounding public speaking. So let's talk about those reasons. There's a fear of humiliation. That comes with public speaking. Typically, you're putting yourself in front of an audience, so you don't want to embarrass yourself. Maybe you don't feel prepared enough. Maybe you feel like you need more time so that you sound confident. Maybe you're worrying about one's looks, and what I mean by that is not necessarily how you've done your hair that day, but if you're going to come across as incompetent, or if they're going to notice that you're nervous, if you're sweating a little bit. There's also pressure to perform, especially if you're taking a public speaking class, because there's a grade associated with that. Maybe you're worried about the audience's lack of interest. Maybe you don't know if they care about the topic. Maybe you have a lack of experience. Maybe you've never taken a public speaking class before. Obviously, the more experience we have with something, the less we're going to be nervous about it. Fear of making mistakes. Of course, we're human. We don't necessarily love making mistakes. We don't like that feeling. Overall fear of failure, especially when it comes to a college class. Maybe you're worried about these assignments because you know that it's an important part of your grade and you don't want to fail the class. But I promise you all, if you put in the effort, the time, and you try and you improve, you will pass this class. So to kind of combat some of those roots, that fear that's happening when we get nervous, here's some tips. Know how to develop a speech. Obviously, the more you know, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. That's why we're talking about that now. Be prepared, practice. Don't just do it off the cuff. The more prepared you are, the more practice you have, the better you're going to be. Deep breathing techniques, you may not need to utilize this in an online class, but if you were going to be in front of a large audience, if you use those deep breathing techniques, it's a direct correlation to slowing that heart rate if you have that, or those nerves. Focus on your audience, focus on your message. Your brain can't focus on the message and being nervous at the same exact time. It can switch back and forth really fast, but technically your brain can only focus on one thing at a time, and then take advantage of opportunities to speak. The more you do this, the more experience you're going to have, the less nervous you're going to feel. I also want to leave you guys with this thought of illusion of transparency. So if you guys do have some anxiety regarding public speaking, maybe this will make you feel better. But this refers to how most speakers feel more nervous than they look. So typically, your feelings of nervousness are not apparent to an audience. So, you may feel your heart rate. We can't hear your heart rate. We can't feel your heart rate. We, most of the time, don't notice that you're nervous. So if that makes you feel better at all when it comes to public speaking, know that a lot of times people are not going to notice that you are as nervous as you feel. Okay, so let's talk about selecting and narrowing your topic. This can be overwhelming when I tell you guys, okay, pick a topic. It has to be an informative speech, but you can pick anything you want as long as it's appropriate for the classroom. Think about these 3 questions. Who is the audience? So you would adapt your communication message to your audience. So think about maybe what do they have in common. You guys are all students here at State Tech. Maybe you choose a topic you think your audience will enjoy. Maybe you don't, but take that into consideration. What is the occasion? Are you being asked to speak for a specific occasion? For example, a wedding toast is going to look much different than a formal informative speech that you guys do in here. So you'll want to alter your speech depending on the occasion. Think about what are your interests and experiences. This is probably the most useful for you all. If you're able to explore your own interests and experiences, that's going to lead you to topics you feel passionate about, which will then in turn make this assignment a little bit more fun and will also allow you to deliver the speech with more genuine energy because you care about it. Versus when I make you all, do some homework on research tactics and things like that. If you talk about your favorite hobby, you inform us what that hobby looks like, how to use watercolor paints, something like that, you're going to feel more passionate about it. So overall, your delivery is going to be more effective, likely. If you're still feeling overwhelmed, there's some elements we can use to kind of narrow our topic down, because the more narrow your topic is, the better it's going to be. If you pick a topic that's too broad, that's going to leave your audience with a lot of questions, maybe a lot of confusion. So the more narrow you can make your topic, the better. So you can use a cluster map, which is our concept map right here on the left, where, for example, let's say we want to do something about COVID-19. Well, there's a ton of elements that have gone into that topic. So how can I think of elements that relate to COVID-19 but are more specific? So think about if I gave you a speech on COVID-19 versus specifically on social distancing within COVID-19. Social distancing, going to be a lot more specific. You're going to be able to discuss details in that between, you guys have about 4 to 6 minutes for your informative speech. So don't select a topic that's too broad. Over here on the right, it is an example of how you can scan web directories and web pages to then kind of narrow down your topic. So you all have probably been on, what we call the internet rabbit hole. You watch one YouTube video and an hour later you're on a completely different topic. So Google search, maybe you find museums interesting. Well, there's a lot of museums, so what's something we can specifically focus on that maybe is on display at a museum right now? You see how we get to the resources, fine arts, collections, specifically American victory posters from World War I. And then here's another graphic you can use to do the same type of element if you're more of a visual person. Say you're really into recreation. Well, there's a lot that goes into recreation. You really like hiking. Perfect. Have you been on a trail hiking that you loved? Oh, the Pacific Crest Trail? Perfect. Well, maybe you can talk about the scenic segments of the Pacific Crest Trail. That'll be very specific, very visual, very easy to talk about. Okay, so once you have your topic narrowed down, these are the elements that you want to discuss within your speech. Your general purpose. you always want to think about what that general purpose is. This is the broad reason that you're giving a speech. So it's always going to be that you're either trying to inform, to persuade, or to entertain. Those are going to be the three different purposes you will always have. When you inform, you're teaching, you're defining, you're describing, you're explaining a topic. When you persuade, that's when you try to change or reinforce the audience's ideas or change their minds. So be careful in your informative speech not to persuade your audience. And lastly, to entertain, that's when you try to get the members of your audience to smile, laugh, overall enjoy themselves. So we'll focus on to inform and to persuade in this class. But remember, your general purpose is the broad reason for giving a speech. After you have your general purpose, then you can think about your specific purpose. So you don't necessarily state your general purpose and your specific purpose in your speech, but it does help guide your speech preparation. So the specific purpose is what listeners should be able to do by the time the speaker finishes the speech. So this example, it shows you how your specific purpose changes based on your general purpose. That's why it's important to know both. For this, if we were trying to persuade someone about, the benefits for adults learning to play a musical instrument, then our specific purpose at the end of our persuasive speech will be maybe that the audience will actually physically enroll in a music appreciation course. However, if we're just going to inform them on the topic, maybe our specific purpose is that hopefully by the end of the speech, the audience will be able to list 2 benefits for adults learning to play a musical instrument. You see how different those purposes are based on that general purpose. Okay, so once you have your general purpose and your specific purpose, then you can develop your central idea. This is similar to a thesis statement within an essay. It's going to make a definitive point about your topic. You will state this in your speech. You want to keep it to a single idea because once again, the more specific, the better. You want to make sure it's a complete declarative sentence versus a question, and you want to use direct specific language. So let's take a look at an example. Here on the left, we have the central idea. Clubbing and marathon running are 2 activities that appeal to many college students. We don't like this idea, this central idea. That's why there's an X. And the reason why is because there's 2 ideas listed in this central idea. Clubbing and marathon running. While it may be true that these are 2 activities that appeal to many college students, there's 2 ideas here that are going to probably be hard to compare. Not saying that you can't do it, but for the purposes of a 4 to 6 minute speech, let's instead edit this to focus on marathon running appeals to many college students. Narrow that down to 1 idea. So that's our definitive topic right there. How marathon running appeals to college students. So then from there, you want to generate your main ideas. Does the central idea have logical divisions? For example, if your central idea is it's easy to change the strings on your guitar, those logical divisions are probably going to be those steps that it takes. That's logical, it makes sense. If there's several reasons the central idea is true, then maybe those main ideas are those reasons. Or if you can support the central idea with a series of steps or a chronological sequence, like I just said about stringing a guitar. But remember, those main ideas are those subdivisions of the central idea of a speech that provide detailed points of focus for developing the speech. So then what happens when we tie those main ideas to our central idea? We get a sentence like this. So first, I've realized my specific purpose is to inform my classmates the effects of losing a pet on the elderly. So from that, I'm going to focus on how when elderly persons lose their animal companions, they can experience serious psychological, emotional, and physical effects. So our main points, our main ideas here are going to be those psychological, emotional, and physical effects. Take a look at this example. To demonstrate to my audience the correct method for cleaning a computer keyboard. That's my specific purpose. So because my specific purpose is to demonstrate, how I'm going to organize my main points is 4 easy steps. So I get to my central idea. Your computer keyboard needs regular cleaning to function well, and you can achieve that in 4 easy steps. And then within my outline, I will list out those 4 easy steps and how you achieve those. So that is how you start to develop your speech. Remember, with public speaking, you need to focus on organization so that your audience can follow along and your speech can be effective.